America, something just unfolded in the energy world that almost no one is talking about. Yet it could impact every American family at the pump, in the grocery line, and on Main Street. Chevron and Valero, two of the biggest names in energy history, aren't just downsizing in California. They're abandoning the state altogether. Not temporarily, not for now, but permanently. This isn't a corporate press release you can scroll past. This is a warning siren blaring across the nation. Because when the companies that fuel our cars and trucks leave, it isn't a local story. It's a national emergency. This collapse will shake gas prices to levels most Americans have never seen. It will rip jobs out of vital industries, it will tighten supply chains already under stress, and it will squeeze the American worker hard. And the reason this is happening? The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and his radical energy agenda. A policy framework so hostile to business that even the giants of energy are saying enough. If you care about keeping energy affordable, protecting American jobs, and defending our national independence, you need to watch this entire video. Because what you're about to hear is not just analysis. It is a forecast of what our economy may look like in the coming decade. Smash the like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because today we're walking through an energy reckoning that could redefine America's future. Let's begin with a shift so profound it deserves a place in America's economic history. Chevron, one of the oldest, most iconic American energy companies, has just announced it is relocating its headquarters from California to Houston, Texas. This ends more than 140 years of corporate leadership rooted in the Golden State. To understand how dramatic this is, consider what Chevron once represented. Founded in the late 19th century as Standard Oil of California, Chevron helped build the state's energy infrastructure and fueled California's rise as a global economic powerhouse. For generations, it was a symbol of industrial strength and American innovation. Now that symbol is moving, not for a temporary project, not for a new refinery, but permanently relocating its corporate heart. Why? In the most candid terms yet, Chevron executives have said it's because California has become a tough place to do business. As Chevron's own leadership put it, the state's business environment is burdensome and unsustainable. California is a tough place to do business, it's a tough place to recruit people, it's a tough place to move employees, and a lot of our employees will not move to California. That makes it difficult. Think about that for a moment. One of the world's largest energy companies, a corporation that supplies gasoline to hundreds of millions of Americans each year, is leaving because it can't operate efficiently, hire and retain talent, or compete under California's current policy regime. This isn't corporate spin, this isn't conjecture, this is Chevron's own leadership explaining the move. And this departure didn't happen overnight. Chevron began shifting portions of its workforce to Texas years ago, quietly, steadily, long before the press release. Historically, California once courted energy companies. It once built infrastructure, supported refining, and generated jobs tied to power generation and fuel production. That era defined much of the 20th century's economic boom on the West Coast. Today, that era is fading. In its place are burdensome regulations, cap-and-trade tax schemes, and mandates that make capital investment unattractive. Policies that critics say have systematically driven refining investment out of the state. This isn't simply a shift in corporate geography. It is a cultural and political turning point. It reveals a stark reality. When government policy punishes productivity and elevates ideology over economics, even America's legacy corporations begin to seek refuge elsewhere. And what Chevron's exit signals goes beyond San Ramon's corporate towers. It signals the erosion of California's role as a leader in America's energy economy. It signals that policies once marketed as green and progressive are now forcing businesses to flee. It signals that energy production and refining, the backbone of everyday life, can't thrive where regulation outpaces reason. And most importantly, it signals a warning to the rest of this country. Because if today's economic policies can drive Chevron out of California, they can cripple any state, even red states, if unchecked. That's the deeper lesson here. Chevron didn't leave because it wanted to. Chevron left because the policy climate made staying untenable. And every American who fills up a gas tank, pays for groceries, or drives a delivery truck should understand what that means for their future. Because this is more than corporate exodus. This is a wake-up call about the price of bad policy. And it will hit your wallet long before most politicians admit it. Just when you thought the energy story couldn't get more alarming, it does. Valero, another giant in the American energy sector, has just dropped a bombshell. It plans to shut down its Benicia refinery in California by April 2026. This isn't speculation. This isn't rumor. Valero officially notified the California Energy Commission. This refinery isn't a tiny operation. It produces millions of gallons of motor fuel every single day, roughly 145,000 to 170,000 barrels per day. That's about 9% of California's entire crude refining capacity. Let that number sink in. A single refinery responsible for nearly 1/10 of the state's gasoline output is being taken offline. That's not a minor reduction. That's a structural collapse in fuel production. Valero CEO Lane Riggs addressed the announcement head-on, acknowledging the tough realities facing the plant and its community. We understand the impact that this may have on our employees, business partners, and community, and will continue to work with them through this period. But here's the key takeaway. That quote masks the hard truth underneath. This isn't about local job losses alone. This isn't a quiet facility transformation. This is a major piece of America's gasoline production network disappearing. The reason, as Valero made clear, is tied not to demand, not to a lack of need, but to regulatory and operating challenges so severe that continuing is now economically untenable. In simple terms, gas production in California is dropping fast, and when production drops, supply tightens. When supply tightens, prices go up. And when prices go up, the burden spreads to every American who drives, delivers, farms, or operates a truck. Think about that for a moment. Truckers hauling freight across the West Coast. Delivery drivers bringing goods to your doorstep. Farmers fueling tractors in the Central Valley. Commuters filling up before work. All of them, already feeling the pain at the pump, will soon feel even more pressure as supply shrinks and demand holds steady. And this refinery wasn't minor. It was part of the backbone of California's ability to meet its own fuel needs. Losing nearly 10% of refining capacity in one fell swoop is not incremental. It is a seismic shift. We're not just talking about gas prices inching up a few cents. We're talking about far-reaching ripple effects, not just in California, but across the entire West Coast market. California already carries some of the highest pump prices in the United States. Analysts warn that this closure, on top of Chevron's relocation and other refinery shutdowns, will tighten supply and drive prices higher than anyone expected. This isn't a distant possibility, it's a near-term reality. And if policymakers don't act, or if the governing philosophy continues to prioritize regulation over production, the consequences won't stay confined to one state. They will spread across the entire nation, hitting ordinary Americans right where it hurts, their wallets. This is why the Valero closure is not just an economic headline. It's a warning sign, not just for California, but for the future of gasoline affordability in every American town and every American household. Because when production falls and imports rise, prices always follow. And that's a future we can't afford to ignore. Imagine two very different Californias. On one side, you have bureaucrats in Sacramento, comfortable in climate policy halls, applauding themselves for green leadership, insulated from boardrooms, gas pumps, and dinner tables across the nation. On the other side, you have American families, truck drivers, farmers, and small business owners. Patriots who wake up every day knowing that energy isn't an abstraction. It's the cost of putting food on the table, delivering goods, and keeping the lights on. This isn't just policy talk. This is real economic life and death. And right now, these two worlds are on a collision course. Let's be honest. When Chevron leaves and Valero shutters a refinery, this isn't an economic ripple. It's a tsunami building out at sea, invisible to those standing on the shore until suddenly it's upon them. Experts aren't whispering about this. They are sounding alarms. Analysts warn that the combined effect of Chevron's departure and the planned closure of the Valero refinery could push California gas prices well past $6, even $8 per gallon. Let that sink in. We've all felt pain at the pump before, but we've never lived through a systemic fuel shortage in modern America where refinery capacity collapses while costs rise. This isn't theory, it's happening right now. And the longer regulators ignore these warnings, the worse it will get. State Senator Brian Jones has been one of the few voices in Sacramento willing to speak plainly about what's coming. California gas prices could see a significant increase, potentially rising by 75%. This isn't hyperbole. This is forecasted reality. Independent energy analysts project gas prices could hit $6.43 per gallon by late 2025 after shutdowns take effect. And if Valero's Benicia refinery closes as planned, prices could balloon to as high as $8.43 per gallon in 2026. Let's break that down in a way every American can feel. That's not a few extra cents. That's a nationwide headline level increase. That's parents filling up the minivan. That's truckers passing the cost on to every grocery store. That's farmers watching their operational costs climb beyond profitability. And this isn't just a California problem. Far from it, because California doesn't just serve itself. California fuels neighboring states like Nevada and Arizona. Here's the metaphor every patriot should understand. When California sneezes, the rest of the West Coast catches pneumonia. And when energy supply tightens in a major market, prices don't rise neatly in one place and stop. No, prices radiate outward, like heat from a fire, reaching every corner of the region, then the nation. Transportation costs rise, supply chain pressures spike, goods that need fuel to move become more expensive. This is the physics of scarcity. And in economics, scarcity is inflation's fuel. So let me ask you directly, do you think Sacramento should be rewarded with praise or held accountable when their policies are predicted to send gas prices into the stratosphere? Drop a comment right now. And if you want more videos that break down how policy affects your wallet and your freedom, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because patriots need truth, clarity, and honest analysis in times like these. Because here's the bottom line. When energy production shrinks, when capacity is lost, when supply becomes dependent on imports, American consumers will pay the price, literally, at every gas pump in every town. This isn't speculation. This is forecasted consequence. And the fight isn't just about prices. It's about who we are as a nation, whether we choose prosperity and independence or scarcity and dependency. Let's pause for a moment. I want to hear from you. Do you think California's government should protect local energy production, even if it means bending the rules and subsidizing big corporations? Or should they let the free market decide, even if that risks sending jobs and refineries out of state? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I'm reading every single one, because in the next section, we're going to break down both sides of this debate, what it means for your wallet, your community, and the future of American energy independence. So speak up. Your opinion matters, and it might surprise you how many patriots are thinking the same way. To understand why Chevron and Valero are exiting California and why refineries are shrinking or disappearing altogether, we need to look past headlines and examine the political architecture of the state's energy policy. This isn't simply corporate foot-dragging or cyclical market fluctuation. This is the predictable outcome of a regulatory regime that systematically disincentivizes investment, penalizes production, and amplifies political risk. In political science terms, California's leadership has erected structural disincentives that distort the market and undermine basic incentives for capital allocation. At the center of this is Governor Gavin Newsom's energy policy framework, one that prizes ideological symbolism over economic equilibrium. Rather than balancing environmental goals with the realities of industrial production, Sacramento has pursued a maximalist regulatory strategy that interprets ambition as absolutes and mandates as immutable. Here are the principal mechanisms of that strategy. Cap and trade programs that embed cost uncertainty directly into corporate financial planning. Mandated special gasoline blends that isolate California from the broader national fuel market. Profit caps on refinery margins, effectively penalizing firms when market conditions, not managerial decisions, produce windfall gains. Environmental compliance regimes that go beyond federal standards and escalate operational complexity and cost. These policies, coupled with some of the highest tax burdens in the nation, skyrocketing housing and labor costs, and bureaucratic inertia, create what political economists call a disinvestment trap, when the cost of operating within a system outweighs the expected benefit of remaining in it. One industry insider framed it succinctly. The cost of doing business in California now outweighs the benefit of operating here. We're forced to relocate or shut down. Valero's own financial statements make this explicit. In its recent quarterly report, the company took a $1.1 billion pre-tax impairment charge on its California refining assets, including the Benicia facility, signaling that the state's regulatory and operating costs have become barriers to profitability, not just hurdles. In strategic analysis terms, this represents a shift from policy as deterrent to policy as disruptor. The state's governance model is no longer a competitive environment. It is a compulsory exit strategy for capital. In classical political economy, states that embed long-term investment risk into regulatory frameworks eventually face capital flight. This has historical precedent. When Britain's Industrial Revolution gave way to early 20th century Fabian socialism, heavy regulation and punitive taxation precipitated an exodus of industrial investment, with consequences that echoed through decades of stagnation. Today, California's economic trajectory mirrors that pattern. What was once a center of American industrial dynamism has become a laboratory of policy orthodoxy, unmoored from economic pragmatism. The drivers of this pressure are clear and systemic. Stringent emissions and climate mandates that significantly raise compliance costs, high tax rates and statutory fees that reduce net returns on investment, enforcement actions and litigation risk that introduce unpredictable legal exposure, policy frameworks that make long-term capital commitment unattractive, if not irrational. Under these conditions, refiners like Valero and Chevron are not just choosing between profit and loss. They are choosing between certainty of regulatory penalties and uncertainty of future viability. As Valero itself admitted in forward-looking disclosures, the company is now evaluating the strategic viability of its California operations and has concluded that business as usual is no longer a tenable strategy. This trend is not isolated to a single company or facility. Across California, refineries are either shrinking production, converting to renewable fuel facilities, or facing closure altogether. The aggregate effect? A systemic erosion of domestic gasoline refining capacity, not because demand has vanished, but because policy risk has overwhelmed economic signal. From a macroeconomic perspective, this dynamic undermines energy security, destabilizes regional markets, and shifts dependency from domestic production to external supply chains, often international ones. From a political perspective, it reflects a failure of governance. When the instruments of state policy, taxes, mandates, and bureaucratic authority become the very forces that dismantle the industries they purportedly aim to transform. And from a moral standpoint, it raises a fundamental question for patriots and policymakers alike. Can a society that cannot balance environmental ambition with economic viability truly claim to be stewarding either mission responsibly? Because right now, the consequence of California's regulatory orthodoxy is not just economic contraction. It is a redistribution of American energy capacity away from American soil. This is why Chevron and Valero are leaving, not reluctantly, strategically. This is why refinery closures are accelerating, not incidentally, institutionally. And this is why gas prices, absent a course correction, will escalate not as a short-term spike, but as a structural shift in the American energy economy. Understanding this isn't just analysis. It's insight into how policy, power, and profit interact in the modern republic, and why the future of affordable energy depends on whether states choose innovation over ideology, competitiveness over coercion, and pragmatism over purity. What's happening in California is not a parochial squabble over state policy. It is a national portent, a warning light flashing on America's economic dashboard. When gasoline production collapses in a major region of the country, the effects don't stay in that region. They ripple outward, like a pebble dropped in a pond whose waves spread to every shore. Gasoline is more than a commodity. It is the lifeblood of the American economy. It fuels the trucks that deliver goods to stores and kitchens, the buses that carry workers to their jobs, the tractors that harvest crops in the heartland, the construction crews building the infrastructure of tomorrow. When fuel becomes expensive, every sector of the economy feels it. Food costs rise, shipping costs rise, the cost of living rises, the cost of doing business rises. This isn't an abstract theory, it is empirical economic reality. And if current trends continue, by 2026, analysts are projecting fuel prices could top $8 per gallon in key markets. That is not a marginal increase. That is systemic stress on families, supply chains, and regional economies alike. And here's the broader national implication that every American, Republican, Democrat, Independent, or undecided, needs to understand. When a state of 40 million people becomes dependent on foreign imports to satisfy its energy needs, we are outsourcing not just supply, but our economic security. That's not energy policy, that's strategic retreat. It flies in the face of the America First principle. The idea that American industries, American workers, and American energy should remain competitive, independent, and sovereign. The current trajectory, shrinking domestic production, growing import dependence, and rising costs, is pretty much the opposite of that vision. And the moral lesson here is stark. A nation that fails to defend its industrial base, that prioritizes regulatory signaling over economic stability, and that accepts dependency on external sources of essential energy, loses not just economic footing, it loses autonomy. This situation is also a test of our political culture. For decades, America was able to balance ambition with pragmatism, pushing technological progress while preserving economic growth. This was not luck. It was rooted in traditional American values: resilience, innovation, self-reliance, and a commitment to productive labor. Today, that balance is being tested. If we prioritize ideology over economic reality, we risk short-term virtue signaling at the expense of long-term prosperity. If we champion environmental goals without safeguarding economic infrastructure, we risk hollow victories that cost everyday Americans dearly. If we accept dependency on foreign fuel rather than incentivizing domestic production and energy independence, we are choosing outsourced security over national sovereignty. This moment, this crossroads, forces a national reflection. Do we want a future where America imports its energy like it imports its goods, beholden to external forces and global price volatility? Or do we want a future where American energy fuels American jobs, powers American industry, and strengthens American families? Some will argue that California's policies accelerate innovation and environmental progress. That is a legitimate debate. But progress in policy must be measured against its tangible outcomes, not just its intentions. Right now, the outcome is clear. Major energy employers are leaving. Refining capacity is shrinking. Supply is tightening. Prices are rising. Broader markets are being affected. And communities that never asked for this predicament are being forced to pay for it. California is even offering incentives to keep refineries open, a rare and costly pivot, demonstrating that policy architects themselves now recognize the gravity of their own decisions. But incentive packages, subsidies, and emergency interventions are reactive, not strategic. They attempt to mend symptoms without addressing the structural causes: regulatory complexity, cost burdens, and legal uncertainty, making long-term investment unattractive. And in political strategy terms, a government that reacts only after the damage is visible is a government that has already lost the strategic initiative. For America to remain prosperous, we must learn from this situation. We must reaffirm the principle that sound energy policy is national security policy, and that domestic production must be protected, regulatory certainty must be restored, market incentives must align with national interests, and energy independence must remain a cornerstone of our economic architecture. This is not a debate about red versus blue states. It is a debate about the future viability of the American economy, the well-being of American families, and the preservation of American sovereignty in a competitive global order. And it is a call to action, not just for policymakers in Sacramento, Austin, or Washington, but for every citizen who fills up their car, pays for groceries, and cares about America's future. If this moment teaches us anything, it is this: prosperity without production is unsustainable. Independence without infrastructure is illusory, and national greatness cannot be decoupled from economic strength. That is the lesson. That is the warning. That is the choice facing America today. America stands at a crossroads, and the signs are impossible to ignore. Chevron and Valero aren't just moving offices or idling refineries. They are the canaries in the coal mine, sounding the alarm on California's failing energy policies. Their departures signal a structural shift in energy, jobs, and the very cost of living. If California's leaders don't reverse course, every American will feel it at the pump, in the grocery store, and in every corner of the economy. This isn't theory, it's reality. And the consequences won't wait. They will hit hard, fast, and unexpectedly. This is a moment that demands awareness and action from patriots. This is about energy independence, American jobs, economic security, and the survival of a system that puts citizens first. Imagine a world where fuel prices double, trucks stop moving, farmers can't operate, and delivery networks collapse. That's the trajectory if this crisis goes unaddressed. But there is hope. Understanding the problem is the first step. Being informed now lets you prepare, act, and demand policies that protect domestic production and American families. So here's what I want you to do. Like this video if you found this breakdown valuable. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a critical update on America's energy future. Share this video with friends and family. Every American deserves to know what's happening behind the headlines. And now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Should America respond with policy reform, incentives for domestic energy, pipeline investment, or something else entirely? Because one thing is clear: when energy leaves, freedom, jobs, and opportunity follow. Stay informed, stay alert, and above all, stay American. I'll see you in the next video.